Good morning, Grumlaw. We are so thankful that you are joining us, whether you are in Heartland or Grand Blanc. We are so incredibly thankful that you are spending part of your Sunday here at Grumlaw. My name's Maddie. I just want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up this month. October 21st, we have a worship night. It's going down at our Heartland campus, 7 p.m. We are so thankful that God promises us His presence, and He also promises us that when we gather and we show up to draw close to Him, that He will always draw near to us. So you don't want to miss that. Be sure to cancel those Friday night plans, set up a babysitter. There is no childcare provided for this event, but we promise it's going to be worth it for you to show up and spend that time in God's presence together in community. Also, the end of this month, the day before Halloween, 10:30, that is a Sunday, we have Trunk or Treat going down at both of our campuses. It is sponsored by Groups. We're having an old-fashioned, think of a tailgate party, but trunk or treat. Your kids can throw on their costumes, and immediately after service, we will commence a little trunk or treat action. Be prepared to come home with potentially like 5 to 7 pounds of candy, so you might want to hide that from your kiddos. But anyway, it's going to be a blast, super, super fun. Even if you don't have kids, we will have cider and donuts that day, and just a good old-fashioned good time. So make sure that you're prepared to stay after church a little later that day, because it's going to be fun for the whole family. Grumlaw Women, we have an event just for you. Ladies' Night is going down on November 4th. That is a Friday, but don't take my word for it. Here's a little bit more info.
Grumlaw Women, we've got an event coming up just for you, and it's only 1 month away.
That's right, Friday, November 4th from 7 to 10 p.m. So mark your calendars, cancel the plans and line up the babysitter. Or emotionally start to prepare your husband that he's watching all 7 of your kids.
Right.
Because it's Ladies' Night!
It's gonna be a night to have fun, unwind, and we promise if you show up, you're gonna leave here feeling refreshed and encouraged.
And it's only $20 for a great night out. There's going to be dinner, there's going to be worship, and there's going to be some amazing communicators.
Yes, so find all the details and register at grumlaw.com/discover. We can't wait to see you there.
Yes, all of you women watching right now, Ladies' Night is right around the corner. So again, make sure you sign up for that. Invite some friends. Great opportunity to just, again, invite other people that you know into community here at Grumlaw. And again, you can find out all those details, sign up, all that good stuff at grumlaw.com/discover. For those of you I have not met before, my name is Shay Prisk, and I have the privilege of serving as the lead pastor around here. We have a quick favor to ask of those of you who are maybe new around here, or maybe you're not that new, and just for whatever reason, this part of the service has become white noise to you. So white noise gone. Did that work? Okay, maybe. Well, go to grumlaw.com/new right now, and please fill out a Connect card. That allows us to connect with you, but it also allows us to connect with our community, because for every new Connect card that we receive, we donate $5 to a local school. So right now, wherever you're watching from, pull out your phone, go to grumlaw.com/new, and fill out that Connect cards. We are so glad, again, that you decided to show up here today. And one of the things that we love celebrating around here are stories of life change. And we love the fact that there's no like JV Holy Spirit, there's no JV God. It's like the same God of the universe who is pursuing, 50-year-old adults in our church is also pursuing those young children in our church as well. People just like Cole.
I've known Jesus since I was basically born, and Jesus has always been with me. I started going to Grumlaw when I was 5. I like coming to church because I can express my love for God. On Sundays, I like to go to Grumlaw Kids, and sometimes I like to bring my friends to Grumlaw Kids so they can learn about God as well. My grandma recently got cancer, and when my grandma was sick, I was afraid and nervous, but I had to trust in God a lot to know that He would take care of her. My grandma is feeling really well today. Her cancer is basically gone, and her hair's growing back very, very fast. God's been teaching me that I can trust Him when times are tough, and I can believe that He will answer my prayers. Jesus is my forever friend that is always with me and by my side, and I can trust Him. Knowing Jesus is with me means whenever I'm scared at night, because that happens a lot, and whenever I'm stressed, which also happens a lot, I can just pray and Jesus makes me feel peaceful. Life with Jesus is super awesome, and that he helps me calm down, and maybe he will make you feel the same way. Hi, my name is Cole Goodfellow. I'm being baptized because I want the world to know that I love Jesus.
Cole, thank you, man. I am so proud of you, buddy, for taking that step, for going public with your faith. And honestly, that there is something about when these kids are going public with their faith through baptism that I just kind of look around our church and I'm like, us adults, we don't really have much of an excuse. Look at the courage of these young kids, honestly paving the way for a lot of people that are a lot older than them to take that step. And what's really exciting is our next baptism service is right around the corner, November the 13th. And so if you are watching right now and you have never went public with your faith as an adult, the same question I ask just about every single week: what are you waiting for? Stop hesitating. That magic moment where it just completely feels right, it is never going to come. At a certain point, it's just a step of obedience that we take as followers of Jesus. You can sign up for that next baptism service, or maybe you just have some questions about that by texting Grumlaw to 94,000 and then follow the prompts for baptism. Really, really excited about what God is going to do again on November the 13th, and excited to see all the people that are going to take that step. Now, if you're a guest around here, please don't feel obligated to play a part or jump in on what I'm about to say right now at all. But if you're a person who calls Grumlaw their church home, one of the great ways that we get to partner with God and what He is up to in the world is just by frankly giving, by giving a portion of our finances back to the local church. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that. You can go to grumlaw.com/give, or you can text Grumlaw to 94,000. Again, use that text to give option and then follow the prompts for giving. But by far the best and the easiest way to give is to set up a recurring gift at grumlaw.com/give. Again, to so many of you, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for your obedience in this area. Thank you for honestly even allowing Grumlaw to exist. We're so glad all of you are here today as we continue in our series, Different. One of the privileges that we have in this life, and maybe even more so in our country, is that we are free. We are a free people. Each of us, we possess free will, with the ability to make decisions on our own as we see fit. Now, this certainly both benefits us at times and probably hinders us at different points in our lives. But my free will, for instance, it allows me to spend my money however I want. If I want to buy a new pair of shoes, I can do that. If I want to give a bunch of money away, well, that's my decision. My free will, it allows me to choose to only be with my wife. But that free will, right, could just as easily choose to be with another woman, to have an affair if I so chose. So I think most of us, right, we appreciate that we have free will, but we all recognize that when used improperly, it can get us into a little bit of trouble. We also, as people living in America, we live right in a free country. You're free to make a living however you see fit. You're free to marry who you want. You're free to practice any religion you want. But there are some laws, there are taxes that, for the most part, we do recognize, well, those rules, they've been put into place, at least initially, for the betterment of people and the betterment of society as a whole. And when you compare the freedom that we have in America to other countries around the world, you recognize, well, we got it pretty good. We value our freedom, but placing it head and shoulders above, well, almost anything else in our lives. But what's sort of interesting is, even though we place such a high emphasis on being free, we don't actually live into that freedom to the maximum capacity that we're able to. See, all of us, we willingly allow our freedom to be restricted. And I would say actually a lot more than probably any of us realize. We allow our freedom to be restricted by one question in particular. This one question, which as we're going to explore is really more of a fear, it controls our lives so much more than any of us have likely considered. The question, what will he think of me? What will she think of me? What will those people think of me? So yes, we are free people, but this question, this fear, it infringes upon that freedom more than any other force in our lives. I mean, just think about it. This question plays a role in virtually every decision that you and I make. Human beings, both Christians and non-Christians alike, we are slaves to this question. Unless you think that's overstated, just think about it really practically. This question, at least to some extent, it dictates whether or not you make that career change, whether you major in this or that, what car you drive, what neighborhoods you move into, what types of questions you even ask in certain conversations, how you dress, what type of phone we buy, where we spend our free time, where it is that you go on vacation. I mean, just think about it even here, just on Sunday mornings. Whether or not you actually stand and sing during worship, whether or not you might actually put a hand up, whether or not you've gotten baptized or not, praying in front of other people, even down to where people sit on Sunday mornings. There is very, very little in our lives that this question does not play some sort of a role. So yeah, we're free people, but maybe not as free as we think. We are ruled by what others think of us, but by what others might think of us. I was having a conversation a couple of years ago with a friend, and he's almost through residency. He was about to finally step into his long-awaited career as a physician. And we're sitting there over breakfast, and he had kind of out of the blue said, "Hey, can we sit down and talk?" And you could tell it was just something gnawing at him. And he's like, "I've only told this to my wife and now to you, Shay, I don't want to be a doctor." I was kind of like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "I've never wanted to be a doctor." And he's like, "It's making me depressed thinking that this is what I'm going to end up doing for the rest of my life." And I was like, "Well, why are you doing this then? Why did you ever step into med school and then residency? Like, why did you walk down this path?" And he's like, "My dad's a doctor. And ever since I was a little boy, I've just felt this pressure from my dad and my parents in particular that is what I have to do. And so here I am. I'm about to step into this, and I don't even want to." Church, think of the implications of that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. 12 years of his life pursuing a career that he doesn't even want for himself, all because of the pressure of how his father would perceive him if he didn't walk down that path. Just months ago, having a conversation with a guy. And he kind of excitedly told me, he's like, "I know what my next step is in this whole faith journey." He was relatively new to his faith, and he's like, I'm supposed to get baptized. And he's like, I just can no longer reconcile the fact, like, Jesus is just really, really clear about this, right? It's believe and get baptized. Not believe, wait 5 years, and then maybe get baptized. Like, believe and get baptized. He's like, I know that is my next step. And I'm like excited, and I'm ready to sign him up for the next baptism service. And then he looked right at me, and then he kind of put his head down, and he goes, "But I'm not going to." I'm like, "Wait, what?" This is kind of like both ends of the spectrum. He goes, "Yeah, as you know, I came from the Catholic Church, and that was huge. Like, when I took that step, I felt all kinds of guilt for my parents, and in particular my mother. And I just feel like at this point, if I was to move forward and get baptized, because I was baptized as a baby, that to my mother, that would really feel like rubbing salt on an open wound. So, yeah, I know I'm supposed to do that, but I'm not going to." Keep in mind, this is a grown man. He's in his 60s. And later on in the conversation, he said this so casually. He's like, "Maybe I'll do it when she dies." I've shared this story before. When I was in high school, I went to a rather affluent high school, and I didn't really fit the mold for that. My parents were not that wealthy, and in fact, they scraped by to send me to this private high school. And one of the things there when you're amongst all these wealthy kids that just frankly have a lot more than you want to fit in. And so I remember my junior year, and I've told this story. I went to the mall and proudly bought a $450 pair of Prada sunglasses, all because I was so worried about how my friends were perceiving me and that maybe if I wore this really expensive pair of sunglasses that they would like me more, they would affirm me more. And about 6 months into that, I thought, what in the heck am I doing? I had to work like 2 weeks for a pair of stupid sunglasses that look like snow goggles. And so I put them on eBay and I got most of my money back. And what I haven't told many people is about a year later, I did it again. I went to the same store and this time bought a pair of Dior sunglasses. I don't remember exactly how much they cost, but they were well over $200. Did the same thing over, all because I was so consumed with okay, what are these people around me going to think of me if I don't have nice things like them? Now admittedly, sometimes those stories, they're pretty funny. Until we again examine our own lives and we realize that most of what we do is at least partially determined by this one question, which, as alluded to a moment ago, is less of a question and more of a fear, traditionally referred to as the fear of man. But put in simpler terms, the fear of what others will think of me. I'm not going to take that job because of what my dad might think of me. I'm going to wear these clothes because I think she will like them. I'm going to buy these things because it'll make me appear a certain way to those certain people. I'm going to insert these stories into this particular conversation so that maybe he will like me more. I'm telling you that this fear has a stranglehold on our lives more than probably just about all of us would like to admit. Which on one hand, if you're paying attention right now, you could kind of just take an apathetic mindset and say, okay, who cares? I mean, everyone, in fact, as you just pointed out there, preacher boy, everybody lives like this. So why do I care? Isn't this just kind of how the world operates? And while that's not untrue, I'm guessing by virtue of the fact that you tuned in here today, that you're watching this service, that there's something inside of you wondering if there's anything more to this life than, well, this life. Than what it is that you're currently experiencing, what you're currently living into. This rat race that we call life with its obsession with what others might think of us has maybe proven exhausting. And you're wondering if this Jesus guy might actually be offering something not just different, but is it possible that he's offering something to you and I, something that maybe is better? A way to break free from the monotony of this life, the chasing of my tail nature of this life, and tap into something that stretches beyond you. And what I'd like each of us to consider this morning, and this isn't just for the person who's starting to explore, but for maybe even more, the individual who's been at this church thing for a long time. I'd like you to consider that the reason your life has perhaps been lacking in fulfillment to this point, the reason that you've never seen God show up like that in your life, the reason that maybe you don't feel as content and enriched as you thought you'd maybe feel by this point in your life is because you're being ruled by what others think of you. And in turn, and I absolutely believe this because my own life has shown me this, it's primarily that fear that is in fact preventing this. In turn, you're not allowing a movement of God to occur in your life. That won't only impact your life, but all the lives around you. We're so obsessed with what others think of us that we all but completely forget what God thinks of us. We're so consumed with the fear of man that we give almost no thought to what we might be missing out on if we would just submit to his plan. It's been said many, many times by men far wiser than me that the most tolerated sin in our churches is fear, and more than any other fear, again, that fear of man. And we'll talk about on Sunday morning sexual sin and what do we do with our money and consumerism and lying and idolatry, but for whatever reason, we're slow to call this out when we see it in ourselves and the people around us. And there's probably a lot of different reasons for this, not the least of which being kind of that feeling of hypocrisy. It's like, how could I possibly call this out in him and her when it's still so prevalent in me? But church, the longer we obsess over what others think of us and use that as our primary tool in how we exercise our free will, the longer we'll miss out on what God has waiting for each of our lives. And I promise you, I'm not just using that phraseology for dramatic effect. The movement of God that awaits each of us. We're unpacking this morning value number 5 of 7. We expect God to move. And as we're going to uncover in a lot more detail, our obsession with what others think of us and allowing that to supersede anything that God may want to do in our lives is hindering ultimately the better that God has waiting for you and the people around you. We're in this series right now titled Different, where we're exploring our 7 church values that reveal our heart. What is it that makes Grumlaw different? What is that distinct calling that God has placed upon this faith community? And we've been excited to reveal these to you. They are, of course, belong before you believe. We uphold biblical truth, contagious joy, live generously as we explored last week. We expect God to move, assume the best, and obedience is the win. If you're new around here, or maybe you haven't been here for the entirety of this series, I'm telling you, you owe it to yourself, and I really mean that. As you're considering laying down roots here in this faith community, you owe it to yourself to understand what it is that we're all about around here. And you can get yourself caught up at grumlaw.com/messages, or you can find those sermons via podcast under Grumlaw Church on iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you grab those podcasts. Now, there are a lot of different stories that I could use to illustrate the point that we're making this morning. In fact, this is one of the most common threads that we see all throughout Scripture, all throughout this book called the Bible. And that pattern goes something like this. Man obsesses over what others will think of him. And I want you to keep in mind, it's not just a men thing. I'm using man, him here because most of the stories feature hard-headed men, but I promise you this is just as true as of females as well. We obsess over what others think of us. And then, number 2, God grabs man's attention. In fact, God actually is trying constantly to grab our attention if we would just turn to him and we'd listen up. Again, not to beat a dead horse, if we would distract ourselves for a moment from what others think of us. So God usually does something kind of dramatic. He grabs man's attention, and then man places himself in submission to God. Usually, sadly, for a pretty short period of time because we're emotionally fickle people. But at least for a moment, he or she is obedient and does what God has been advocating. Now, usually we take forever to finally get to that step, and God is so incredibly patient in this way, but we finally take that step of obedience. And then, and this is really what we're going to hone in on this morning, this is the key, there is a spirit of expectation among the people. That is, that individual or group of people, they beg, usually through a combination of confession, prayer, fasting, worship, that they beg for God to do what only he can do. There's a spirit of expectation that is birthed from recounting what God has done in the past and understanding that same God with that same power is still on his throne and he longs to come through again. And then, voila, a movement of God occurs that serves not only to impact the life of the individual or the group of people who started on that journey, but all the people who stand as witnesses to said movement of God. All throughout Scripture, all throughout the pages of history, we see this exact same pattern play out. You see it with our Old Testament, that first half of the Bible, those heroes, Abraham, David, Moses, Elijah, Esther. We see it in the New Testament with people like Peter and Paul, the first century church as a whole. We see this with every great church revival, the Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, the Businessman's Revival, urban revivals, the Jesus movement. Every personal testimony in this church of a movement of God in someone's life follows this exact same pattern. And perhaps most notably, an expectation that God is going to move. So again, I could have picked a lot of different stories here that we could have unpacked, and for whatever reason, I felt like God was pointing to Joshua. This is an individual that we're introduced to, again, in the Old Testament, that first half of the Bible, and it's aptly titled, this book, Joshua, because it follows around Joshua and his leadership over the Israelite people, God's chosen people. Now, Joshua, for those of you who've probably maybe not heard of him before, he was Moses, and you've probably heard of Moses before. He was Moses' successor. And Moses was the guy who led God's chosen people, the Israelites, out from under the oppression of the Egyptians and Pharaoh. And so needless to say, some pretty big shoes to fill for Joshua. And most notably, he was tasked with the individual who's going to finally bring the Israelites into the promised land. This land that had been promised to the Israelites now for literally generations. And there's even a reminder right there. God's time frame is often different than ours. Many, many people, most notably Abraham and Moses, they went to their graves without seeing themselves this promise come to fruition. It was originally promised to Abraham. He went to his grave not seeing it come to fruition. Moses went to his grave. He didn't see the promised land come to fruition, but yet they still trusted that God would come through because of who he is, because he is faithful, because he is to be trusted. Now, one of the frequent hiccups with the promised land was that oftentimes entire people groups were standing in the way. And so the Israelites, like oftentimes as they felt so inadequate, they're like, we got to take over this entire, like, oh my goodness, it's so intimidating. And then God would come through yet again. And the next town up was a town called Jericho, which served as sort of like a gateway city to Canaan, which was actually going to serve as the promised land. In short order, if you don't conquer Jericho, you're not getting to the promised land. But yet there was one problem. This was a massive, a locked, a fortified city with these massive walls protecting the city, and there was no simple way to penetrate these walls. To the Israelites, to the people, they were like, this is great, we've come this far, but officially it kind of stops now because there's no way we're getting through Jericho. And that right there is where we pick up our account in Joshua chapter 6. It says, now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. At this point, the reputation of the Israelites and their army had gone before them. It didn't matter what type of force opposed them. God was fighting for them, and so people were kind of scared at the Israelites at this point, and Jericho being no different. So they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lock this place down. No one, it says, was allowed to go out or in. They're like, we're just going to close our gates. We're going to play the long game. We have these really tall walls. Nobody's going to be able to get through. We're just going to wait out the Israelites. But the Lord said to Joshua, I've given you Jericho. He reaffirms that promise. He's like, you're going to walk into the promised land. Jericho is not going to be the hiccup along the way. I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. And you would expect, or I think we slow down enough to think about this, we all would expect that what would follow next would be like this detailed battle plan for how to get over and penetrate these walls. But what God offered was, well, let's just say, I don't know, maybe a little bit unconventional. He continues talking to Joshua. He says, you and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. It's like, okay. And 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark. That is the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandments, these stone tablets that were delivered to Moses by God himself on Mount Sinai. The 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. And on the 7th day, you're to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. And then the walls of the town will collapse and the people can charge straight into the town. So if you're paying attention at all, the big plan for how to penetrate these walls involves walking around the building, walking around the city. Then it involves some blowing of horns and then hollering, shouting real loud, and supposedly the walls are just going to collapse. Now, here's what we love to do in church. We read accounts like this without even flinching. We don't really even give them a second thought, especially those of you who grew up going to church, and we think rather calmly, without any emotion, wow, praise God, crazy story. But can we just be real people for a moment? Can we just take a minute and think of how absolutely preposterous this would have sounded? How foolish this would have looked to the people of Jericho as the Israelites are just walking around the walls for 7 days. Like, what are they doing down there? Are they going to cast a spell on us? I mean, let's just think about Joshua for a moment. Try to put yourself in his shoes. This is kind of like his coming out party. This is his first opportunity to lead the people as Moses' grand successor. Can we even imagine what is going on in his head in this moment? It's like, God, I don't know if you've noticed, but the people, they really, really, really like Moses. I mean, Moses was like their dude. And I got some big shoes to fill, and I don't think that this is going to go particularly well. I'm just telling you. I mean, I know, like, through you, anything's possible, but I think I'm going to sound pretty stupid if I go to these people and tell them that the big plan to make these walls come down and take Jericho involves, again, marching around the city, no swords, none of that kind of stuff, and and then we're going to blow horns, and then we're just going to yell. Like, you got to understand that is going to be a hard sell. So, got an idea. How about you go back up to heaven real quick, take some time in your study, think about this, and how about you come back with a brilliant battle plan instead? Why don't we try like the yelling at the walls thing the next town we go to? Because I really, really, really need to make a good first impression. But don't miss this. I want all of us to see what happens next. Most notably, how Joshua responds. Joshua called together the priests and said, "Take up the ark of the Lord's covenant," and assigned 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn. Then he gave orders to the people, "March around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord." Joshua does not flinch. It may have been only for a moment, but church, for at least a moment, he gets over what people might think of him and decides instead to be obedient to what God has asked him to do. Don't miss this. This is so important. This is the entire message in one sentence. He behaves as if what God has said can be trusted. Or perhaps even simpler, his behavior points to an expectation that God will move, that God can be trusted, that God is going to come through. See, notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't reluctantly go to the Israelites, to the people, and say, "Okay, here's the deal, everybody. So God, I know you're waiting. He did give me a plan. But I just got to tell you, it's crazy, and honestly, I'm not even sure it's going to work, but maybe it might. So, I don't know. If you want to come out and help, great. If not, no biggie. I totally get it. Sounds crazy to me too, so let's just kind of see who ends up showing up, and we'll see. I don't know if God ends up doing the same. He's been up to some pretty crazy stuff lately, so maybe, but I know it sounds preposterous." He behaved in accordance with the promises of the living God. He behaved in accordance with how God had come through for his predecessor. Parting Red Seas, water flowing from rocks, food falling from the sky every day. He behaved in such a way, and in fact, would hinge his entire reputation, his entire professional career, which was just beginning. He would hinge it all on these 7 days. He behaved as if what God had said could be trusted. He behaved with an expectation that God would come through, that God would move. Listen, can God work in the midst of our lack of faith? Yeah. Can he move as literally everyone doubts, even those who claim to love him? Of course. Can he work in the midst of our lack of obedience? He has done that and probably will continue to do so from time to time. But does he normally? No. Church, that's just a reality. That is not how he normally operates. Now again, I'll remind us, God is always present among his people. In fact, actually, Paul plainly reminds us in the early letter to the Christian church in Corinth, he says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" And he's talking to followers of Jesus here, and he's phrasing it this way because he probably figured that some of the people had forgotten about this, which probably stands to reason that some of you who are watching and listening right now, you have probably forgotten this, that as a follower of Jesus, God quite literally, the Holy Spirit, dwells inside of you. But there is a huge difference between God being present, which he is among every follower of Jesus, and his presence falling on a people. It's the difference between a church service where, and you've been a part of these, where you leave and you go, "Yeah, it was good. There's good music. People were on key. Good preaching. I felt inspired, felt a little even convicted. I mean, good people. I felt welcomed. I felt known. It was fine. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll come back next week." And those services, and some of you, maybe you've never been a part of this, but those services where people en masse are bawling their eyes out. Sin is being confessed. adultery being confessed, pornography addiction, substance abuse. It's just being all laid out plain to see. Strongholds being broken, hardened hearts given to the Lord, where we look around and we say, oh my goodness, the presence of God is all over this place. And what always precedes a movement of God is a person or a group of people operating with expectation. A people behaving like Joshua. Active faith activates the power of God. The tangible presence of God is always ushered in by the hunger of his people. Church, God responds to an expectant heart. God rewards audacious, expectant faith. Yes, he honors and he responds to that. It moves the heart of God. We say this often around here. God will not force himself upon people. He already offered and took the massive step towards us when he freely gave us his son. It's now on his people to be obedient, to be hungry, to expect him to move. His power is never ushered in by a spirit of timidity and hesitation. It's always a spirit of God is going to come through. Because the exact same power that parted the Red Sea, that dropped food from the sky, that rolled in plagues all over Pharaoh and the Egyptians, is the exact same power that wants to work in my life today. That same God is still on his throne. That same God who raised a dead man from the grave is at work in me and wants to work in the exact same way through me. It was Jesus himself, Jesus' words. He tells us, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me, who believes in Jesus, will do the works I have been doing. And I think we'll all agree, Jesus did some pretty crazy stuff. He's walking on water. Lame could suddenly walk. The blind could suddenly see. He's feeding like 5,000 people with just a couple loaves and a couple fish. Nutty stuff. The works I've been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. Because he's like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be hanging out with you one-on-one anymore. I'm going back to the Father. Jesus wasn't kidding. He meant this. That this is a promise for you. The problem isn't with God. That same God is still on his throne. The problem so often it lies with us, our lack of faith. Our lack of expectation for God's mighty power to come through. Our obsession with what people think of us rather than being obsessed with the living God and his plan. The God who wants to work in this exact same way in and through you. Joshua, the Israelites, on this particular week, in church, I'll remind us, they didn't always get this right. In fact, you read about the Israelites, and you can pick up and read about them in Exodus and those early books of the Old Testament. They often were known as a people who had a lack of faith, a lack of expectation. But on this particular week, for these 7 days, they behaved as if what God said could be trusted. They behaved with an expectation that God would show up, that God would move. And wouldn't you know it, just as is always the case, when the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could. And suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed. And the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. A movement of God occurred among the Israelites that day that we are still talking about right now, thousands of years later. Church, I don't always get this right. Just like all of you, fear of man often reigns supreme in my life. But it never ceases to amaze me what God will do with even the smallest step of obedience. What God will do with a person or people behaving with an expectation that he will move. People repenting, confessing, fasting, crying out in prayer and worshiping God because of who he is, who he has always shown himself to be. We expect God to move. the God who is worthy of that expectation, the God who is worthy of our trust. He who has withheld nothing from us, not even his son. And so now we choose to trust him in return. Now, a couple of closing thoughts that I'd like to leave with us, and I promise I'll be brief. Obedience and expectation will usually, it's the norm, will usually look foolish to the world. Which is why, by the way, you and I reject and deprive ourselves of those movements of God in our lives and in turn the people around us. This is exactly, again, what Paul was talking about. Again, in that early letter to the Christian church in Corinth, he says, "For God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." As we talked about ad nauseum, we care way more about what people think of us than what God thinks of us. In church, this is why developing a relationship, spending time in his presence, reading his word, talking with him, developing a real relationship, and being obedient when he prompts, when he nudges, is so important. As you see God come through, your faith grows, and in turn your trust in him grows, and in turn your tolerance, frankly, for the weird looks and the passive-aggressive comments, that grows as well. Because you get hooked on watching God show up in your life. Adopting children when you're perfectly capable of getting pregnant, it doesn't make sense. Falling to your knees in the middle of a worship set amongst all these people, it looks foolish. Giving away large portions of your income to the church, it seems financially irresponsible. Striking up a conversation with a random person who's pumping gas next to you and sharing something that the Holy Spirit has laid on your heart, that feels embarrassing. But 'tis the way of following Jesus. And so I have two questions to leave us here with this morning. One, where is God asking you to be foolishly obedient? Where is he asking you, and maybe where has he been asking you for a while now, to take a step of obedience that will look foolish to the people around you? And right now, you choose to keep your eyes fixed on who goes before you. But very practically, for a lot of you, in a minute, you're going to have an opportunity to exercise this. Because we're going to do something that we do every single week. We're going to stand and sing praises to our Lord and Savior. Let me even just ask that very frankly. Did you show up here today expecting God to move? And before you're quick to respond, yes, does your posture during this message, and more importantly, does your posture during worship consistently affirm that yes? Might it be today you choose to reject those feelings of, oh, what is my wife, or what is my husband, or what is my boyfriend, or what is my friend, what is my child next to me going to think if I actually start to sing and kind of get into this? And instead, you choose to respond in praise to the living God who desperately wants to show up and show off in your life. Church, what if breakthrough? What if experiencing God in an entirely new way is on the other side of just taking that simple step? And if you're watching right now and you think, that just seems too simple, believe it or not, what I just very specifically described happens all the time. It happened in my life. And let us remember that as we're taking these foolishly obedient steps and we're going, oh my gosh, and everything inside of us is pushing back saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and you're obsessed with what other people are thinking about you. Remember, Jesus doesn't ask us to do anything that he didn't already do himself. Jesus did not hesitate to make a fool of himself when he offered himself on the cross for you. I mean, just think about that. The God of the universe subjected himself to all the limitations of humanity. He became flesh and allowed himself to be absolutely humiliated on that cross and did it all for you. And then question number 2, what do you need to start or continue circling? That they went around those walls for 7 days. And I can promise you, because they were real human beings just like you and I, they would go back home at the end of the night, and wives would talk to husbands, and husbands would talk to wives, and families and friends would talk to each other. And they'd be like, what are we doing? We look like such idiots out there. They felt all kinds of foolish until and the walls came tumbling down. What do you need to keep circling? What is it that you need to keep praying for? What have you given up on that you need to start circling again? And I want to remind us one more time, with God, the outcome rarely occurs in our perceived timing or what we would perceive would be best. That's why he encourages us, hey, be patient in me, be patient in the Lord. In fact, it's in the waiting that our strength in the Lord is renewed, where our faith is deepened, where our trust is increased, where our relationship actually grows. While we wait with faith, God continues to shape and mold us. So right now we're going to head into a time, as already alluded to, that, again, something we do every week. We're going to sing. We're going to praise the God of the universe who got off of his throne for us. And I want to remind us that the same God that we are singing to today is the same God who came through for Joshua, who came through for Moses, who came through for Jacob, who came through for Abraham, who came through for David, and so many more of our biblical heroes. The same God who rose Jesus from the grave is the same God who sits on the throne today, the same God who longs to move in power in your life. Let us be a people whose behavior points to an expectation that God will move.
I've tried so hard to see it. Took me so long to believe that you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve it. You take the broken things and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. Now I can finally see it. You're teaching me how to receive it. So let all the striving cease. Oh, this is my victory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Everybody 'cause you are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. A battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high, oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. See are the ashes, you see the beauty. Oh, when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. Oh, so when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high, God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. And almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. And almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So So when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Church, there is so much truth in that. We declare our victory, not because of us, not because of what we can do, but because of the God who goes before us, who goes with us, who goes after us. Let us be a church that has that expectation that the God of the universe is going to come through. He is a God who keeps his promises. Now tagging back to what we've been talking about today, we're going to mention this, and we mention this every single week of this series. If you have not participated in this might be a great week to begin. Text different challenge to 94,000 right now. We got to remind you, re-up every single week. And what this does is this tags back to what we've been talking about on Sunday mornings. And just once a day for the next week, you'll just receive a text just kind of calling back to what we've been talking about again this morning. Remembering again that there's a God who wants to fight for us. Again, when we meet him with that expectation that he's going to come through, he always shows up in our lives. So again, if you haven't been participating in this for whatever reason, maybe this is the week, text different challenge to 94,000 and opt into that. So again, that we can continue to tag back to what we've been talking about here today. If you've been considering checking us out in person, we invite you to go to grumlaw.com/new, fill out that Starbucks order there, whether you're showing up at Grand Blanc or Heartland, you designate that. That order will be here waiting for you whenever you decide to come walking through our doors. I'm telling you, this entire experience comes alive in brand new ways when you participate among other people who are also moving towards Jesus. Service is not quite done yet. Grumlaw Kids is still right around the corner, so if you have young ones, gather them from wherever they're running around right now. Song and a lesson just for them. And parents want to challenge you, actually participate in this with them. Best part of the service is coming down here 1 minute.
Hey Grumlaw kids, I am so excited for you to hear today's story all about grit. It'll have us thinking about something that turned out better than we expected. Now make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram at Grumlaw Kids so you can stay connected. But right now, I want you to stand up and we can sing to Jesus.
Everything keeps telling me to quit and not go where I'm going. But I'm never ever
Do you know what this means? This is important. Do you know what this means?
You want to quit your job and become a sculptor?
No.
You're going to hit me in the face with that.
No.
This mountain shape reminds you of a close encounter you had with visitors from another planet, and just looking at it makes you want to somehow, some way, find your way back to that place so that your mind can finally be at peace?
No. It means I like mashed potatoes a lot.
Oh.
And also the second thing. And that's how I got rid of the squirrel smell. It was that easy. Oh, hey, everybody, I'm John.
And I'm Brandon.
And this is the So-and-So Show.
Hey, today we've got a very special game to play.
John! I'm Brandon.
Yes?
You've got to come with me. At once.
And who are you?
Oh, of course. Apologies.
Yeah.
I am Doc Tan.
hi.
At your service.
Well, welcome to the show, Doc.
What kind of a doctor are you?
Never mind. Listen, your studio is in danger.
Danger.
Yes, I've come from the past.
You what?
Travel through time to get to you.
I have waited my entire life for somebody to say that to me. Am I dreaming?
Ouch! You're supposed to pinch yourself to see if you're dreaming, not someone else.
Oh.
Ow! Listen, we are wasting time here. Your younger selves are about to turn this basement into an arcade.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
No, not cool. Because if it turns into an arcade, then it will never become a studio. And the So-and-So Show will never exist. It's time. I have set this alarm to precisely 17 seconds before we need to leave. Now, put these on. Quickly,
Okay.
quickly.
Here we go.
Okay, grab my hands.
All right.
John, press the button for us.
No.
No!
The John and Brandon Show, episode 1, take 1, marker. Okay, go.
You're supposed to say action.
Oh, I didn't know that. Action.
Not now, John. We've already ruined this take.
Oh, so start over?
Yeah, here, let me do it. The John and Brandon Show, episode 1, take 2, marker, action.
No.
Oh,
Oh, man.
sorry.
What are we doing, Brandon? We don't know anything about making a show.
I know, but I thought it would be fun to make your basement into a studio.
Yeah, but it's too hard. Let's try something else, something easy.
Like an arcade?
Like an arcade.
Do I know you? You seem familiar.
Yes, I am, how do I explain this without altering the entire course of my life?
It's you, your future self, all grown up. See? The hairline, the baggy eyes, the wrinkly lips.
Okay, I'm not that old, but he's right, kid. I am you.
Cool.
Super cool. So what happens? Do I become an astronaut, an actor, an underwater drummer?
Oh, I totally forgot about underwater drumming. No. But you know what? I really don't want to tell you everything that happens because if I do, it'll ruin half the fun of your journey. Let's just say that this basement comes in real handy.
Ah, the arcade. I knew that was a good idea.
Actually, not the arcade. A studio.
Nah, we already tried that. It's too hard.
Oh, well, hey, at least you tried. Yeah.
No, hold on. You can't give up on something just because it's hard. You've got to keep going.
Yeah, because there are things that happen to you in the future that you don't know about yet.
Yeah, like if you don't keep going, then you're gonna miss out on some of the greatest things that have ever happened to you. Like you'll get to spend all this time hanging out with your best friend, and you get to meet a lot of exciting new people and play games and learn about God.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's right.
Well, I guess we could give it one more try.
Oh, yeah.
And we could put a desk right here and sit behind it like real show hosts.
Yeah, and you know what? You could really make a difference in the world, and you couldn't do that if you played in an arcade all day.
We don't really know how to make a real show.
We haven't known how to do that for 5 years. But hey, listen, remember what our great Uncle Spaghetti Todd used to say? Yeah. You don't have to unravel the whole bowl of noodles before you eat. Yeah, right. Sometimes you just gotta go for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Close enough, close enough.
You did it!
We did it!
You saved the studio! Jump, rabbits! It's time. We have to return you to the future!
Okay. Well,
John, you know what to do.
yeah. Here, press this button.
Sure.
Go for it. Oh, one more thing. You have to change the name of the show. It should be called The Sewin'.
Change the name of the show to what?
I don't know. He said the sew and sew show or something like that.
We'll just use that as a placeholder.
Yeah, until we get something way better.
It's time for Bible story time with Kellen.
Who's Kellen?
Hey guys, listen, unfortunately something has come up and I can't be with you all today, but don't worry, everything's fine. And I don't want to leave you all high and dry. So I asked my good friend Cameron and he's gonna take over for me today. All right, take it away, Cameron.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good.
Yeah, we just time traveled and saved the show, so pretty good day. What about you, Cameron?
Just getting ready for another awesome Bible story. You guys ready?
Absolutely.
Today, we're learning more about Joseph, whose story is written down in the book of Genesis. Joseph was born into a big family. He had 10 older brothers. His father, Jacob, loved Joseph more than his brothers and treated him extra special. He gave Joseph a beautiful, expensive coat with many colors. Joseph had dreams that one day his older brothers would bow down to him. So his brothers became angry and jealous of Joseph. One day they teamed up against him, took him away and sold him into slavery to some traders headed for Egypt. Joseph's brothers let their father believe Joseph had been eaten by a wild animal. While he was enslaved, Joseph was accused of something that he didn't do, and he was thrown into prison. Joseph spent years in prison, forgotten and alone. One person who forgot about Joseph was the Egyptian King Pharaoh's chief wine taster. He'd been in prison with Joseph, and Joseph had told him what his dreams meant. But when the wine taster went back to work for the Pharaoh, he forgot all about Joseph until 2 years later. Pharaoh himself wanted someone to tell him what his dreams meant. The wine taster finally remembered, and so Joseph was brought to Pharaoh.
Joseph, I've heard that when you hear a dream, you can explain it.
I can't do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he wants.
Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, one about cows and one about grain. And with God's help, Joseph told Pharaoh what his dreams meant.
God has shown you what will happen. 7 good years with plenty of food are coming, but then 7 years without enough food will follow. Pharaoh should look for a wise, understanding man to take charge and store some of the food in the good years so there will be food to use later.
God has made all this known to you? I'm putting you in charge of the whole land of Egypt.
Pharaoh gave Joseph the royal ring that he was wearing. He put fine robes around him. He gave Joseph a chariot to ride and made Joseph the second in command. Joseph traveled all throughout Egypt and helped to store grain during the 7 plentiful years. Then, the 7 years of famine, when the land didn't produce any food, began. The famine stretched to all the surrounding lands too. And everyone who was hungry came to Joseph to buy food, including Joseph's brothers. His 10 older brothers traveled from their homeland far away. They bowed down to him just like Joseph dreamed they would. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him, so he pretended to be a stranger.
Where do you come from?
The land of Canaan. We've come to buy food.
You are spies.
No, sir. We are all brothers. We've come to buy food.
Joseph didn't reveal himself, but he gave his brothers food. And he told them that if they ever came back, they had to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin. When they ran out of food again, they brought Benjamin back to Egypt, this time to Joseph's own house. When he saw his brother Benjamin, Joseph could no longer keep his secret hidden.
I am your brother, Joseph, who you sold into Egypt. Don't be upset, and don't be angry with yourselves because you sold me here. God sent me ahead of you to save many lives. He made me like a father to Pharaoh and a ruler of Egypt. Now, go back to my father and tell him everything.
Then Joseph hugged each of his brothers and cried over them. Pharaoh set aside the best land in Egypt for Joseph's family. Joseph was finally reunited with his father, and Joseph was able to provide for all his family. Joseph had some very hard times. It would have been easy for him to give up, but he held on, and God worked out even the worst circumstances for good. In the end, Joseph forgave his brothers and saved their lives. Even when Joseph couldn't see it, God was with Joseph. Joseph could only see his story in parts while he was living it. God could see the bigger story.
Whoa.
My thoughts exactly.
I mean, Joseph's brothers were terrible to him.
Yeah, they were. But Joseph didn't give up. God was able to make something good come out of something bad.
You know, God's pretty amazing at turning things around.
Totally.
Great story, Cameron.
Bye.
Anytime. See ya.
I am glad we decided to keep going all those years ago. Otherwise, we would have missed today's story.
Yeah, and they would have too.
Yeah, everything turned out much better than I expected.
So true.
So, hey, reveal the question. Oh, yeah, that's good. When has something turned out better than you expected? You know, maybe you had a school project you were worried about, but then it went really well.
Or you had to go somewhere where you didn't know anyone and you ended up making a friend.
Yeah, there are opportunities all the time for God to exceed our expectations.
Absolutely.
So I hope you'll join us next time. We expect it'll be amazing. Maybe not that good. I'm John.
And I'm Brandon, and this was the So-and-So Show.
That is so much better than the John and Brandon Show.
Yeah, it should have been the Brandon and John Show anyway.
Why?
Because my name would have come before yours.
How so?
Brandon and John. Brandon comes before John when I say it that way.
Why?
Do you really not understand what I'm...
No.
Hey! Oh. Oh. Hey! You! That one looks like you. What? That one looks like you. No, I don't see a sheep.
So we're still doing this.
Hey.
Oh, man.